Hi there, my friend. I'm Peter Barron. Welcome to today's episode of the Independent School Moonshot Podcast. I'm really excited for this conversation. As you know, this pod is all about business model innovation and driving new thinking into the market and figuring out like how do we build long-term sustainable pathways for our schools. That's really the kind of the core and the root of the podcast itself, as evidenced by the name Independent School Moonshot Podcast, right? And today I have Andy Williams here. He's the head of school at Masters Academy International. If you're not familiar with Masters Academy International, we'll get into it in just a little bit, but it's a brand new school that's opening just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, that has a real focus on athletics and is changing the model in really new and interesting ways. So I'm excited to dig into it. This is this kind of conversation that I just find so interesting. And with that, Andy Williams, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Peter. It's good to be here, and hopefully, good end to the week we've got
Yeah,
going.
we're recording this on a Friday.
Yes.
Excited for, I don't know about you. I'm excited for the weekend. I'm guessing you're excited for the weekend too.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but before we get there, let's dig in. Can you start by introducing yourself and Masters Academy International?
Sure, Peter. Be happy to. I'm Andy Williams. I've been in education for all my life. To be honest with you, um, and I obviously my background. I grew up in Liverpool, in England. Met my wife there. Went to college there. So big Liverpool fan as well.
Goes
And
without saying,
so
right?
yeah, in the mid 80s, started making my way over to the United States through sports and education, coaching and teaching. And we've lived here and raised both of our daughters, over the last 35 years. We've actually been living in the United States longer than we lived and grew up in Liverpool at this point.
Hmm.
And then during my time in the United States, I helped to start soccer programs from scratch. Instrumental in helping some local towns get soccer programs up and running. Then with couple of friends of mine, we started one of the first elite soccer programs actually, where we would travel all through the United States, and did the same thing as many folks were doing in that time. We started to develop sports programs for kids in an area that really soccer was just blooming at that point in the early 90s and into the 2000s. um, During my education, I was really fortunate over the years. I've worked in amazing schools and school districts. I actually started in the public schools in Morristown, New Jersey. I started there as a teacher. I was a head of school, and then I was the head of 9 schools, helping to stand up everything from academics to everything else that you can imagine, from preschools to ninth grade academies, redesigning middle grade programs, and helping to formulate and sort of launch, but really support a K through 5 multi-age program. So we were really fortunate in the public schools to have an amazing school board who really pushed us to consider how we lean into innovation in the public system. And very fortunate to have been part of that organization and community for 20 years, something I'm really proud of, actually. We still live in that community, and both my daughters went to school in Morristown. And then from there, because we were really a spotlight was getting shone on the school district, because we were doing amazing things with a very, very diverse group of students. We had students who were coming from homeless solutions, and at the same time, students who were arriving at school from $20 million mansions in the same school district. We had kids going off to Ivy Leagues, we had kids going off to county colleges, and we had kids going into the work life right from school. So the district was an amazing petri dish of exploration and innovation. That was a precursor to me being asked to join Avenue School. At a leadership conference in Guatemala, I was speaking about systems thinking and bringing systems thinking into schools. And I was sitting on the bus going between Guatemala, Antigua, and Guatemala City, and a couple sat next to me, still remain good friends with me today, and said, "Hey, we're thinking of starting this school. It's called Avenues, the World School. would you be interested in coming and speaking to the small group of us that are getting together on Saturdays in the New York? Would you be interested in doing that? I said, of course, and I went in and I met the founding team at Avenues, the World School, which included, this cadre of folks who were amazing educators. And I, to be honest with you, I had a little bit of, I think what you call it, imposter syndrome, right? Because I was sitting in this room with these amazing people. I was thinking, what am I doing here?
Mm.
And then lo and behold, after a dance of a few years, I was able to join Avenues. I joined as the director of teaching and learning. And that included a variety of things from helping to support professional development to being on tiger teams where we would start to think about what schools of the future could be, not what they should be. And so that dance with Avenues over the 12 years I was there was just an amazing experience where we started schools in New York City, Shenzhen, Sao Paulo, Silicon Valley, and we had an online school in the mid 2010, 2014s, so before COVID. In that ensuing work, my job at one point was to be traveling from Shenzhen, helping to bring the DNA from the New York campus to China and to Sao Paulo, working with fantastic people in each instance. And lo and behold, because I was really part of the team that helped to start the school in Sao Paulo, it made sense for me when the head of school stepped aside, Ham Clark, for me to step in. And so I was really fortunate to be living and working in Brazil for about 5 years, which was something that my wife and I still talk about every week. We miss it immensely, and obviously. That then led to the interest in the folks at Masters Academy reaching out because my portfolio was obviously a mix of education, public, private, independent, and starting school. So here I am. I'm here at Masters Academy because I've really benefited and seen the powerful combination of great coaching and great teaching and what it can lead to. It changed my life, Peter. And that's why what MAI is designing to deliver for every student resonates with me. It's almost like a capstone, I feel, to the work I've been involved in for over 35 years.
That's a fascinating career. Like what an arc. And now you're at MAI, Masters Academy
Yeah.
International, and you're in the midst of preparing to open a brand new school in Stowe, Massachusetts. Uh, you've purchased a campus from Bose. You're getting that ready to go online. Like, talk me through, like, how does that even work? Like, how do you get a new school open? Like, what does that process look like? And, I also, this is kind of a long question, so I apologize. But also, I'm curious, like, how did the school decide to pull focus on athletics? Like, what is that origin story too?
Yeah. So that's an interesting one because I understand, as I'm sure we're all aware, that masters what we're trying to do is build a new kind of school. And
Yeah.
the intentionality around it is that it's integrating pro level athletics with tier one academics into a single well aligned experience rather than asking students to balance two competing systems, which is often the case for our student athletes. So, put another way, athletics and academics are competing for time more often in our schools, but in our school, they're intentionally knitted to work together. And our purpose is quite simple. We're looking to train students to think, train, and perform like professionals. And what that really means is the genesis of the idea was that we weren't just going to be focused on what students know, because it's not just about playing the games. We're focused on training and supporting students so that they can really be developing their skills in what they can apply when it matters most. And that means in the classroom, in residential life, and on the athletic field or court or the ice or any situation that our kids find themselves in. So it's really about the ability to apply under pressure true skills and concepts in real situations. So what we're really trying to do is build a school that reflects the world that our students are entering, where one that values performance, adaptability. I mean, goodness me, coming out of COVID, we have to understand that being adaptable is a 22nd century skill, and also putting a high price on character. And so the umbrella of our school of academics, athletics, and character and leadership is something that we're really proud of in regards to the where we've started. And where we're fortunate, Peter, and I know your question asked, well, how do you get started with that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We literally started by sitting down in a room and saying, what's our reason for existing here? What is it? What are we going to do, and what are we not going to do? What are we going to not promise to do? So the very first point, and I've learned this from my time at Avenues, we made it crystal clear about why we exist, and trying to boil that sentence down, or to one or two, or to that thread to one or two sentences is
Yeah.
the most difficult thing.
Without question. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about elegant subtraction. That's one of the things that I saw you posted not too long ago about that thread. But that's the hardest thing to say. We're going to be clinical about why we exist and what we do. And we were fortunate that we're not bound by legacy, which many schools who've been established for many years have to overcome. So that's the starting point. Being clear about why we exist and what we do.
And that leads me to so two questions of mine, but I promise you I'll ask you one at a time this time. So I'll make it a little bit easier on you. Um, yeah, you just mentioned it, right? You're not bound by legacy and tradition, which, is a big part of what makes our schools, but it also is a constraint in that, if you have to adapt to different market conditions, it can be challenging, right? It's hard
Mm,
to be adaptable when you've got years of tradition kind of built on
mm,
top of it. You have the ability to think, okay, we're starting this from scratch, so we don't have those constraints. So that means we need to think differently about a lot of things, one of them being schedule, because I
sure.
know that's a tension point for a lot of families and schools around. You want to do lead athletics, you want to do obviously it's the academic program is really important, but it
Mm.
can be tough to balance all of those things. So how does that work? How did you approach that, knowing that you're starting from the beginning, you have all of this ability to kind of break down the traditional models to do something different? How did you approach it, and where do you land?
It goes back to that playbook where you're very clear about why you exist and what you do. So we
Yeah.
start from there. That's our foundation. And when we then think about the day and the week and even the arc of the year, what it will look like, there was three things that we really were clinical about and had some discipline around. It was, we wanted to design the day and the week for how students actually perform. We also wanted to offer depth over fragmentation. And then one of the third building blocks in our statement about why we exist was the concept of learning by doing. So when we take those things in its totality, those three, I suppose, principles were the basis on which we built our schedule. So again, it was strategy first, and then the people, in essence, the schedule. So the the concept about designing for how students actually perform is built on this. So most schools' schedules are built on tradition. Ours is built around performance. So we've taken into account training, academics, and as importantly, recovery and reflection. They're all intentionally structured so students can do each of those things really well. So when you look at a day at Masters Academy, you'll find that there's intentional blocks for training, and not just at the end of the day, but feathered throughout the day. There's time for deep academic work, and there's also built into the day opportunity for recovery and for reflection.
Hmm.
So the goal we decided was not to rush students from one thing to the next, but to actually give them the time and the space to fully engage in each. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So when we think of depth over fragmentation, we, in the academic side of things and on the athletic side of things, we've intentionally created larger blocks of time for students to engage in. Call it inquiry-based learning if you want. It could be project-based learning, problem-based learning, challenge-based learning. But the mastery time as well, the sport mastery time, requires deep amounts of time so that learning takes the opportunity to actually take hold and leads to real understanding. Because on the sports field or the ice or on the court, it's not just going to be practice, practice, practice consistently. There'll be a balance between having students take time to learn new skills, foundational skills, to apply them, and then to use them in real situations. In this case, it would be the game. In terms of academics, same sort of approach. So if we were going to go into inquiry-based learning, we know that really takes time to develop to real understanding versus short-term memorization. So in the classroom, where projects and problems and real-world challenges are going to be brought to life, it takes longer because it requires that length of time to make it stick.
Yeah.
So that was also built into the schedule, that we wanted large, uninterrupted blocks of time for the students, both on the field and in academic life. And then, of course, the third concept, the third leg of the stool, is the concept of learning by doing. And whether it's in the classroom, on the field, the ice, the court, our students are constantly going to be asked to apply what they've learned. So the goal is transfer, being able to take knowledge from one context and use it in a new and unfamiliar situation. So the concept of rapid decision making is a skill that, with AI, that we're considering. Where do we allow our students to actually make quick decisions based on their ability to apply what they've learned? So in essence, it was designed for the schedule was designed for how students perform. It was about depth over fragmentation, and it was based on learning by doing. So we didn't add more to the school day, we redesigned it.
What does that look like? Like if you were to walk me through a day, what might that look like for a student?
Oh, sure. So let's say we take a simple. I'll take you through a simple middle grade experience, for
Perfect.
example. So let's say it's a day student. So a student would arrive around 8 o'clock. They would have their academics in 75-minute blocks, 3 75-minute blocks in the morning.
Okay.
And one of those blocks would be academic studio. So that's where the reflection comes in and the support. So we're lifting the cognitive load off the students. And there's 3 classes in the day for a middle grade student. Then they would have obviously a nutritious lunch and have time to relax with their friends. And then their day would be from around 1 o'clock to close a day. They would be in training, as an example of that. Um, on the flip side of things, if we looked at maybe an upper grade student, imagine a basketball student, for instance, or hockey, one of our hockey players, their training is going to happen in the morning block. So they might be on the rink with the sports psychologist in the performance space during the course of their mornings in the week. And then in their afternoons, they would do their academics and, after lunch and so forth. And then the other thing that we will build into the week is that on a Friday, we'll have a flex day, when students traditionally in many high performing schools who forward athletics, they're often practicing or actually traveling rather on a Friday. So we've even thought about having the Friday as a flex day, where there's time for students to meet the teachers in workshops. We would also, that would give us an opportunity, since we've got sort of a mirrored schedule, for students to have community time when our clubs, our societies, we would come together with grade levels. That's really important about building the community together. There would obviously be lunch, and then in the afternoon, students would be traveling instead. So instead of them feeling the burden of missing classes on a Friday to get to a tournament, we've lifted that burden off the students. So that's an example of a week, Peter. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, very helpful. And you had mentioned before this concept of elegant subtraction. So,
Yeah.
as you're building out your principles, as you're thinking about how you're going to design the school, it sounds like you were saying, look, there's things that we're just going to leave behind. Um, Talk to me about that. What does that look like in practice for you?
Sure, yeah, yeah. Elegant subtraction. It really is about discipline. Because it pushed us to remove what actually doesn't add value, not adding more, but focusing on our students and what they've said matters most to them.
Yeah.
So, in many instances, as I'm sure you know, schools layer on more classes, more activities, more content, and how could we not? Over the last decade or two, schools have taken on new literacies. For instance, visual literacy, informational literacy. Now AI is a new literacy that I see is coming to the fore. So we don't necessarily mean. I think for many schools, just because adding more hasn't necessarily meant better outcomes. So what we've been asking is a slightly different question, and the question that we've been pondering is what actually is required to drive meaningful learning and high performance. So if that is always our go-to question, that then obviously prompts us to create space for inquiry, for discussion, for real-world challenges. It also exposes our students to experiences that take more time so that they lead into mastery and not just short-term reflection or a short-term win. So it clarifies for us exactly what it means when we think about contributing to the student's growth, performance, or character, and whether we're willing to question whether it actually belongs when something comes up. And I would tell you, even in the last month or so, the number of people who've reached out to us and said, "Oh, I've got this amazing program, you should put it in. You've got a new school. Can I get my elbows in there?"
Yeah,
And we
sure.
sort of stepped back and said, "Oh, lovely to meet you, but that doesn't align with why we exist." So, the other thing that we're doing, of course, uh, by saying no to some things, which is really difficult, is we're creating space for mastery. That really is the key here, so that it leads to deeper, more durable understandings that students can then the skills can take with them that transfer beyond school. So we're talking about fluid intelligence skills rather than crystallized intelligence. So really, every part of the student experience is intentional for us. It's something that doesn't, if it doesn't contribute to growth, performance, or character, we question whether it belongs there. And that's really the concept that we've been leaning into when we think of elegant subtraction. What about
Sounds like
you,
you're
Peter? Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're very clear about your priorities.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's something that I talk a lot about with schools is you have to understand that you only have so much capacity as as an individual, as a team, as a
Mm,
community, and you kind of have to be ruthless about what you're going to commit to and then and what you're going to say no to. I mean, it's a
yeah.
hard place to get to because, you know, we want to help people, right? Like that's kind of how we're wired. We want to help kids. We want to help our communities, but sometimes you just can't. You have to be rigorous about what you commit to.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, I'm curious. So you're entering. The school is welcoming its first students in September or August, right? So the new school year is
Yeah.
so not far away. We're recording this end of March, so it's getting close. You're also entering a really competitive boarding school market, right?
Mm,
That this is an extraordinarily competitive time for boarding schools. And you're committing to a very distinct niche around athletics and academic flexibility, all the things that you just talked about. When you're sitting there talking with a family and they're saying, "Hey, we're interested in your school," like what do you think the core problem is that you're solving for those families and those students?
mm. Yeah, that's a good question because it does come up actually with the students and the parents that we've met more recently. So, at the simplest level, Peter, I would say we're solving a trade off that shouldn't exist.
Interesting.
And it's a false trade off in our mind, anyway. So, just to elucidate on that a little. So students, as we know, have traditionally had to choose, pursue your area of true interest or sport, or pursue tier one academics. You choose. We've built AI to remove that compromise.
Mm.
Um, but there's a deeper issue as well that we also have been highlighting, that much of our education system is still based on a model developed, over 140 years ago now, right? Focused on what the student knows, what rather than maybe what the student should think. And how they should think or solve problems are the very things we're facing today, that our students need to become more adept at. And that is obviously becoming more and more apparent as things
Yeah.
become intertwined and complex. So we're talking to parents about the the core problem we're setting out to solve is the false trade-off. We're also talking about the depth required to actually be a student who's prepared for the 22nd century. And then the third thing, unfortunately, it's a reality that we're facing, is preparing students for an uncertain future. Now, at this point, it's not how much information students can memorize. It's about whether they can apply what they know to unfamiliar challenges. Um, and again, that's the difference between crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence skills that students will need in the future. And that's what we're really preparing our students for, not just the next test, but the next problem that maybe they've never even seen before. So that's really what the core problem that we're setting out to solve. It's futures orientated, overcoming legacy educational I don't know, processes, products, and then the false trade-off that many of our students are telling us it's going to be a breath of fresh air for them to have that anxiety lifted off them, where they feel, as students do, we've all got kids who are, and we know kids want to please us. They want to please mum and dad. They want to please, their teachers, and they want to please their friends, and so we're trying to lift that anxiety off the kids as well. So we're considering the well-being of the students as the core to all of that.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the structure of the school, because your
Sure.
MAI is a for-profit school. It's backed by Cognita, which is a international network of schools.
Mhm.
I'm curious, like when you look at it, how does that structure help you support, long-term investment? Like you're building you're building a new campus, you're launching a new program, you're recruiting lots of kids, and how does that help with long-term sustainability?
Mm. Yeah, it's a good question. Um, so I think it actually gives us a real advantage. First, from the onset, it allows us to invest in a very high level from day one in our coaches, in who are amazing. The teachers that we hired are fantastic, and in facilities. So we've been able to build that in a short space of time without having to build that over many decades.
Mm.
So that's been an initial benefit. So we've been able to build at a high level from day one, and Cognita's backing allows us to invest again in the coaches, the exceptional faculty, and the facilities without any compromise. So that's a major advantage, as you can appreciate. Um, the other advantage, of course, as being in a global network, is that it brings global perspective and turns you to continuous improvement, because we're able to draw from a network of schools and a network of expertise, so that we're not chasing best practice. It's coming to us. And actually, we're focused on building better practices through iteration and learning from our partners across the globe, which is such a gift for us as a new community. And then, of course, with Cognita's backing, when we think about sustainability and accountability, being part of that global team ensures that there's discipline and execution. There's long-term sustainability as a core value of Cognita. So that really sets us up for success from the word go, and also presents, an arc of development that we see is going to transcend, the next 5 to 10 years. So we also benefit, of course, our team. We can do all this without having to engage in fundraising. So it allows our team to keep focused on delivering meaningful outcomes for students and families. So there's multiple benefits for
Yeah.
being part of the Cognita family. Yeah,
And so, as you're talking about building that arc, like when you get to this place where you feel like the school is fully on, not online in the terms of internet, but just online in the community, fully
yeah.
formed, maybe it's 3, 4, 5 years out. Like, where do you see MAI? Is like, what's the size of the school? What's the boarding day distribution? Like, what, like for you, like, what is the vision in terms of how many students you can serve?
Sure. So at steady state, the plan is to get to 700 students at steady state, and
What do you mean by
we'll
steady state? I'm curious.
when it would be, hey, the doors are closed, we're full.
Okay,
You know,
got it, got it,
so
got
yeah,
it. Yep.
so 700 students at that would be our goal. Yeah. I'm sorry. What was the follow up question to that, Peter?
And then you've got a distribution between boarding and day.
Oh yeah, so the boarding today, it's about two thirds, one third.
Got it.
So yeah,
Okay.
somewhere in that range. Of course, it doesn't always work out exactly like that, but that's where we've got the capacity. Yeah.
Yeah. One last question. So if a student's thinking about your school versus other schools, like what do you think the reasons would be that they're selecting you versus somebody else? Are you being able to kind of identify that or at this early stage?
Um, that's a
Or does
good
it go back
question.
to what you talked about before? Like it doesn't have to be an either or.
Yeah. Yeah, the students, obviously when we've met quite a number of students, and
Yeah.
many of them very precocious, both athletically and academically. So they have really good questions. What really resonates with them, I've got to be honest, is when you explain the schedule to them. Uh,
Mm,
you literally can see the smile coming on the faces, and you ask, hey, do you understand what the benefits are of academic studio and having a flex Friday? And they can already articulate, oh, that's what I really need right now in this moment. So the immediacy for the kids is something that uh, is exciting to me, to be honest with you, because you can start to see, oh, this is really going to resonate with the kids, and ultimately that's what we're doing this for. Uh, so when I think about the students, it really is resonating with them. It's not a hard sell, because obviously you're matching somebody's passion to actually showing them that the structures are there for them to lift the passion that they have. And that doesn't happen very often, does it? It doesn't come along very often, that opportunity.
yeah.
So that's where I'm seeing the excitement from the students, and then obviously the one thing I have noticed is that you can see the arms of the parents going around the students and hugging them as they're walking out after the conversations we have, so you can start to see the connection that the student is bringing to their family member, because they're just happy, and they're jazzed up, and it's nice to see parents putting their arms around their teenagers, because everybody seems like, hey, I think we've got a solution for you here. So that's been actually, that's the one thing that's brought a smile to my face. I know that sounds a little corny, but I've got to be honest, that's it.
Oh, you can see it. I mean, I can tell that this is a passion project for you. Andy, I got one last question. I actually have one last question. If somebody wants to reach out and say, "Hey, I'd just love to have a conversation," what's the best way for them to do that?
Oh yeah, so they can go right to our website, Masters Academy International, and it says, hey, would you like to talk to us? And
Great.
Drew Cortese is our leading that charge now, and Drew would be happy to pick up the phone, as would I, and answer any questions that folks have. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine some of the listeners who are, uh, listening to the pod may wanna reach out and just learn more about your model. Andy Williams, head of school, Masters Academy International. This has been a really fascinating conversation. I thank you for that. And for those of you who are part of Moonshot Lab, hang tight. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into their model in just a second. But Andy, thanks again.
Thanks, Peter.